My name is Brielle Hartley. I'm 40 years old, and until this morning, I thought I still had a marriage. Before I take you into what happened, thank you for being here. If you believe families deserve honesty and children deserve protection, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story. Someone out there might need it more than you realize. Now let me tell you how I learned my husband had already left long before he packed a single bag. It was a Thursday. Damp, gray Oregon skies. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel still wrapped around my hair, when I heard drawers opening and closing, fast, chaotic. I padded down the hallway barefoot, water still clinging to my arms. And there he was, Damon, my husband of 22 years. In our bedroom, crouched beside his suitcase, stuffing shirts and socks into it like he was running from a fire. "Damon?" I said, my voice catching. "What are you doing?" He didn't look up, just kept packing. "I should have done this years ago," he muttered, almost to himself. The words knocked the wind out of me. I stood frozen, heart thudding. What does that mean?" He straightened, finally meeting my eyes, and I wish he hadn't. There was no apology, no sadness, just vacancy, determination, and something that looked like relief. "I'm leaving, Brielle. Today." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. We had just had dinner as a family last night. We were talking about Alara's science fair. He'd kissed my temple and said goodnight. "Leaving to go where? For how long?" "I don't owe you those details," he said. Cold. Final. I reached for his wrist. "Talk to me, Damon. Look at me and say this to my face." He jerked away like I burned him. "Don't make this harder. You're making it impossible." He zipped the suitcase and yanked it off the bed. "I'll send for the rest of my things later." And just like that, he brushed past me, like I was furniture. I stood in the hallway, hair still damp, feet cold against the hardwood floor, watching the man I built a life with walk out the front door without a glance back. The door didn't slam. It clicked. Quiet. Cruel. And all I could think was, what the hell just happened? After Damon left, I stood in the doorway for what felt like hours, staring at nothing. Just air. Just absence. Then something inside me snapped. Not anger, not yet, just urgency, instinct. I rushed downstairs, almost tripping over the area rug. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast from breakfast. Alara sat at the table, spooning cereal, still in her school uniform. Her ponytail was slightly crooked. "Mom?" She looked up, spoon hovering. "Are you okay?" Yeah, I lied, too quickly. "Dad just had to go somewhere. Quick trip." She blinked. "Okay." My laptop was on the counter. I opened it with trembling fingers and typed in our banking login. I told myself this was just to calm the rising panic. Just to check. The screen loaded. Checking account, $247.83. Savings account, $0. Ilara's college fund, $0. I blinked. Refreshed the page. Blinked again. Still zero. My throat tightened. I opened the transaction history. 3 days ago, while I was at my book club, there had been multiple transfers, from savings, from Alara's 529 plan, every dollar. Gone. I stood frozen. Then my hands scrambled for the phone, dialing the bank's customer service. "Elk Haven Bank, this is Megan. How may I help you today?" I need to report unauthorized transactions," I stammered. She asked for account verification. I gave it. After a few moments, she said it plainly. "Ma'am, your husband, Damon Hartley, has full access. These transfers were made using valid credentials." I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. "Ilara's college fund?" I whispered. "Also under joint access. I'm so sorry." "Mom?" Ilara's voice cut through the haze. I turned to see her standing beside me, concern flickering across her face. "Everything's fine," I said, closing the laptop too quickly. "You look scared." I forced a smile. "No, just surprised. Your dad took more than I expected." She stared at me for a long second. "Did he take my college money?" That stopped me. How did she even think to ask that? "Some of it," I managed, unable to lie. She didn't cry, didn't flinch, just picked up her bowl and carried it to the sink, rinsed it, dried it, put it away like nothing happened. Then she turned to me with the calm of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. "Don't worry, Mom," she said softly. "I handled it." After the call with the bank, I didn't know where to put my hands. I closed the laptop like I was shutting a coffin and just stood there, my breath shallow, my mind buzzing with numbers and disbelief. $75,000. Gone. Stolen not just from me, but from Ilara's future. She stood across from me, arms crossed, her eyes far too still for a child who'd just heard her father had taken everything. "Ilara," I said gently, "your dad, he—" She cut me off with a glance, not rude, just tired. Tired in a way no 13-year-old should ever look. "I already know, Mom." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She dried her hands on a dish towel and walked over to the table, pulled out the chair, and sat. Like we were about to have a meeting. Like she was about to brief me on something. "When he stopped letting me see our bank statements last year," she said slowly, "I figured something was wrong. So I started looking for patterns." I stared at her. "What?" "That's when I started tracking his phone habits, watching what times he logged into his laptop, checking when emails came in. And then I found the money transfers." "Ilara, how—" "I used the iPad he forgot to reset. He logged into his account once on it and I saved the session." My knees buckled. I sank into the chair across from her, trying to find some version of reality where this conversation wasn't actually happening. "You were spying on your father?" "No." She paused. "I was gathering evidence." "Ilara," I whispered, "you're 13. She didn't blink. "And he's a grown man who emptied my college fund and left us. Age doesn't change what's right." I felt my throat tighten. "Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at me then, not as a child, but as an equal. "Because I needed time to figure out what to do, and I couldn't let you fall apart while I did it." That was when she said it, not as a boast, not as bravado, just a quiet statement, steady and terrifying in its calm. "Don't worry, Mom. I handled it." The day after Damon left and took everything, I woke up expecting silence to swallow the house. Instead, I heard the soft thud of the bathroom door closing, the whir of the hairdryer through the wall, and the faint shuffle of a backpack being zipped. Ilara's morning routine. Unchanged, as if betrayal hadn't cracked our lives wide open. I padded downstairs, still in my robe, eyes swollen from another sleepless night. The kitchen lights were on. She was already at the table, eating cinnamon toast and skimming her planner. "Morning, Mom," she said casually, like we hadn't just been left for dead. "Hey, sweetheart," I murmured, trying to sound steady. She took a sip of orange juice. "Do you want me to put the trash out before I leave?" I blinked. "Sure, yeah, that'd be great." She stood, placed her plate in the sink, and tied her shoes with the kind of calm precision I hadn't managed since Damon walked out the door. "Ilara," I said, catching her wrist lightly, "can we talk for a second?" She turned, eyes steady. "What's up?" I searched her face. "Are you really okay?" She tilted her head slightly, like the question confused her. "Yeah, I'm fine. Why wouldn't I be?" Because your dad's gone, and he took everything." "The savings, your college fund." She didn't flinch. "I know. That doesn't bother you?" "It used to." She adjusted her backpack straps. "Now I just want to move forward. That okay with you?" I stared at her, stunned. "You're 13. "I'm aware." I exhaled, shaky. "You don't have to be this strong." She gave me a soft smile. "I'm not trying to be strong. I'm just not surprised. That's different." There was something heartbreaking in her tone. Not bitter, just resolved, like she'd already buried whatever part of her believed in her father. The bus horn blared from outside. "I gotta go," she said. "I've got a math quiz first period." As she walked to the door, she paused, turned, and kissed my cheek like she always used to, before everything shattered. "Have a good day, Mom." And then she was gone. Just like that. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by empty mugs and unopened bills, wondering how my child had become more emotionally composed than I'd ever been in my life. At first, I thought it was the wind. Just soft tapping against the walls of the house. This old place breathes when it settles. But by the third night after Damon left, I realized it wasn't the house. It was Elara. The first time I heard it, I had woken up in the middle of the night, my chest tight from another anxiety dream, this one about bills stacked like bricks, burying me alive. I padded out to the hallway, searching for a glass of water. That's when I heard it. Rapid, rhythmic keystrokes. Click, clack, click. Pause. Click, 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 click. It was coming from her room. I checked the clock. 1:47 a.m. The next night, same thing. Same time. Same rhythm. Like code being written in bursts. Not the lazy, uneven tapping of chatting with friends. No, this was deliberate. Focused. The third night, I stopped at her door. I didn't knock. Just stood there, my fingers curled against the wood, not sure if I was ready for whatever was happening on the other side. I imagined her crying quietly, journaling her pain, or watching old family videos. That's what I hoped. But the clicking never stopped, not even when I shifted my weight and the floor creaked. The next morning, I watched her eat oatmeal in the kitchen like she hadn't just been up all night. She handed me her finished bowl and reached for her backpack. "Elara," I said, watching her closely. "You getting enough sleep?" "Yeah." "Why?" "I've just heard you typing late." Her expression didn't change. "Homework? At 2 a.m.? She shrugged. "Deadlines." She smiled as she said it, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night, I tried again. I walked past her room at midnight, same sound, that steady, mechanical rhythm, as if her fingers had become extensions of something bigger than her. Whatever she was doing, it wasn't homework. I knew I should confront her, demand answers, but I didn't. Not yet. Because part of me, God help me, was afraid of what I'd find out. It was a Thursday evening around 6:30, the kind of night where silence stretches just a little too long between spoonfuls of soup. I made Elara's favorite, grilled cheese and tomato bisque, not because she asked, but because I needed to feel like I was doing something right. Upstairs, I heard the clicking again. Faster now, more urgent. I knocked lightly on her door with the edge of the dinner tray. "Food, sweetheart." "Come in," she called, a little too fast. The door creaked open, and for a moment she didn't look up. She was seated at her desk, posture tight, fingers hovering over her keyboard. Her laptop screen was angled slightly away from the door. When she saw me, she quickly shut it. Not slammed, just a quiet, calculated close. "Thanks, Mom," she said, voice neutral. "You can set it on the nightstand." I obeyed, but my eyes flicked across her desk. There was something off about it. The textbooks, the planner, a few highlighters. It all looked too curated, like she'd staged it for a parent walkthrough. "What are you working on?" "History report, Industrial Revolution." She opened her laptop again, this time showing a blank Word document. I tilted my head, just slightly. "Need help?" "No, I'm good." She smiled, polite but firm. "Thanks for the soup." I didn't push. I kissed the top of her head, inhaling the faint scent of shampoo and something I couldn't name. Independence, maybe. Then I walked out, heart pounding. Downstairs, I stared at the untouched grilled cheese on my plate. Her lie wasn't what scared me, it was how good she was at telling it. That night, I stood outside her door again. The clicking was back, not frantic, methodical. And beneath it, the faint hum of something bigger unraveling. I didn't sleep. The house was quiet again, too quiet. It had been nearly a week since Damon vanished with our life savings, and my sense of time was frayed. Mornings bled into nights, punctuated only by Elara's eerie calmness and the soft clicking of keys from behind her bedroom door. That afternoon, I was putting away laundry. Something normal, something grounding. Elara's door was open for once. I knocked anyway. "Just dropping off your clean clothes," I said, stepping inside. "Thanks, Mom," she called from the bathroom, toothbrush in hand. Her desk was tidy, as always. Maybe too tidy. I placed the folded shirts on her bed, and as I turned to leave, something caught my eye, just barely sticking out from under her science textbook, a corner of paper. White, crisp, printed. I froze. I shouldn't have touched it, I know that, but I did. I slid the page free, and my breath hitched. It wasn't homework. It was an email thread, printed, underlined, highlighted. The subject line read, "Travel plans, finalizing the account." The sender? Damon Hartley. The recipient? Tessa Granger. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago, before he left, before he drained our accounts. My hands trembled as I scanned the contents. "We should book the hotel in Portland under your name this time. I don't want Brielle seeing anything. Make sure the transfer goes through Friday. She won't be home during her book club. We can't leave loose ends with Alara. She's smart." My knees buckled. I sat on her bed, page clutched in my hands like it might burn a hole through my skin. He hadn't just stolen from us. He planned it, down to the hour, the alibi, the digital trail. "Alara?" I jumped. She stood in the doorway, now fully dressed for bed, her toothbrush still in her hand. I looked at her, then down at the paper. Where did this come from? She didn't panic. She didn't flinch. "Dad's not very good with passwords," she said quietly. "You should sit down. There's more." I sat on Alara's bed, the printed email trembling in my hands. My mind raced, trying to make sense of dates, names, phrases like "transfer the full amount before she notices." But it wasn't just the betrayal of my husband that shook me. It was the calm voice of my 13-year-old daughter. "You should sit down. There's more." "Alara," I whispered, "how did you get this?" She stepped into the room, shut the door behind her, and placed her toothbrush on the nightstand like we were about to have a casual bedtime talk. "Dad reuses his passwords. He never clears his browser history. He didn't think anyone was watching." "You hacked into his email?" My voice cracked between horror and awe. "I monitored it," she said plainly. "It wasn't hard once I found his second phone." "What second phone?" She walked to her desk and pulled open a drawer. Inside was a small black flip phone, old, scratched, but powered on. He kept it in his closet. I saw him texting on it one night when he thought I was asleep. "Alara, how long have you been doing this?" 6 weeks. I started with his email, then bank statements. I found the messages between him and Tessa, the hotel bookings, the transaction logs. I stared at her. My daughter, who still wore fuzzy socks with penguins on them, was explaining digital surveillance like she was presenting a science fair project. "You should have told me." "I couldn't," she said, and for the first time, her voice faltered just slightly. "You were breaking. I couldn't let you fall apart while I was figuring it all out." I didn't know whether to hug her or cry. "This isn't your responsibility, honey." "Yes, it is." Her eyes burned steady. "He stole my future, Mom. I have a right to know what he did, and to stop him from doing more." That was the moment I realized. She wasn't seeking justice. She was justice. She didn't say anything for a moment, just watched me with that unnervingly steady gaze of hers. Then, without a word, Alara bent down beside her bed and pulled out a black spiral-bound notebook, its edges worn and pages clearly thickened from overuse. She handed it to me like it was nothing more than a homework assignment. But the moment I opened it, I knew this wasn't schoolwork, it was evidence. The first page was a flowchart, color-coded, arrows connecting names, accounts, timelines. In the center, primary subjects, Damon Hartley, Tessa Granger. My stomach turned. I flipped through the next few pages, handwritten logins, password guesses, behavioral notes. Dad logs into his fake brokerage accounts every Friday between 9:10 and 9:20 a.m. Tessa's Venmo shows unusual payments on the 1st and 15th. Labels don't match bank descriptions. IP address changes, possible remote login masking. I couldn't breathe. "Alara, you wrote all of this?" She nodded. "Every time I learned something, I logged it." There were screenshots taped in, photos she'd printed and annotated like a crime board. text exchanges between Damon and Tessa, a photo of Damon's second phone charging next to his laptop, even a receipt from a hotel in Portland under a fake business account. "How did you even know what to look for?" I whispered. "Some YouTube channels, Reddit forums. I started with basic OSINT techniques and then just followed the trail." I stared at my child, who had compiled a better case than most adults I knew could ever dream of. This is illegal, Ilara." She didn't blink. "So is stealing your daughter's identity and draining her future." Her tone wasn't angry. It was factual, resigned. I closed the notebook carefully, my hands shaking. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you needed time to grieve," she said, "and I needed time to prepare." There was no bravado in her voice, no triumph, just purpose. She wasn't doing this for revenge. She was doing it because someone had to. It started quietly. No dramatic announcement, no slamming of keys or dimmed lights like in some cyber thriller. Just Ilara, sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, sipping her chamomile tea, opening her laptop like it was any other night. But I knew better now. I'd seen the notebook, the blueprints, the way her mind worked like a lockpick. This wasn't curiosity anymore. This was warfare. "Are you sure about this?" I asked her, folding a dish towel with shaking hands. She nodded, eyes locked on her screen. "I've triple-checked everything. Tonight's just the beginning." "The beginning of what?" She glanced up. "Accountability." I walked over slowly, trying not to let the weight of this moment crush me. "What are you doing right now?" Ilara clicked a folder titled Countermeasures. Inside were subfolders labeled Evidence, Anonymous Tips, and Fraud Reports. She opened one marked Langford Financial Internal. "Tessa's been embezzling money through fake invoice accounts," she said calmly. "I compiled a full audit trail." My blood went cold. "How did you even get access to her company's internal—" "She reused her college email password. It still worked." "Ilara?" "I didn't take anything. I just documented everything she did." I looked over her shoulder and saw a draft email addressed anonymously to Langford Financial's compliance department with the subject line, "Urgent. Embezzlement evidence attached." The body was clean, professional. Signed, "A Concerned Citizen." Attached, screenshots, spreadsheets, internal logs, client fund movement. She hovered over send. I couldn't breathe. "Once you do this, there's no going back." She looked at me, so calm it scared me. She stole from people saving for their future. I'm not ruining her life. She already did that. Then she clicked. The email was gone, just like that. Just like one finger, one file, one truth detonated in the middle of someone else's well-manicured lie. And my daughter had pulled the trigger. It didn't take long. By Monday morning, Ilara's email had made its rounds, silently, like a crack beneath polished marble. And by Tuesday, the first fracture became visible. I was refilling the bird feeder out back when Ilara stepped onto the porch, phone in hand, her voice low and matter-of-fact. "She's been suspended." I turned. "Tessa?" Ilara nodded, scrolling. "Langford Financial received the anonymous report yesterday. This morning her keycard was deactivated and HR escorted her out." I blinked. "Already?" They cross-checked the attached documents. Most of them matched irregularities they'd flagged but couldn't explain. Ilara tucked her phone away and went back inside like she'd just mentioned rain in the forecast. But I stood there frozen, watching chickadees flit across the branches, thinking, my daughter started this, and it was only just beginning. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the grocery store for eggs and coffee. In the checkout line, I overheard a woman 2 aisles down whispering, "Did you hear about Tessa Granger? Fired. Something about client funds going missing. The board's looking into it." By evening, local news had picked up a vague story. Prominent financial advisor suspended amid allegations. No names were mentioned, yet. But I saw Ilara watching the segment from the couch, legs crossed, sipping lemon water, face unreadable. "You okay?" I asked, sitting beside her. She deserves worse, she murmured, never taking her eyes off the screen. Maybe. But this is a lot. She turned to me. It's not revenge, Mom. It's correction. I didn't know what scared me more, her clarity or her complete lack of hesitation. The next day, her teacher called. Elara seems unusually composed, she said gently. I just wanted to check in. Is everything all right at home? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say no. I wanted to say, my daughter is taking down white-collar criminals before she finishes pre-algebra. Instead, I said, she's processing, just in her own way. And she was. Emails were being read, audit trails triggered, clients started pulling their money. I saw it in the forums Elara monitored, in the panic thread posts written by anonymous staff. One strike, and the whole machine began to unravel. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that feels hollow, too still, too ordinary. I was rinsing dishes in the sink, hands half submerged in warm, soapy water, when my phone buzzed across the counter. Caller ID, Damon Hartley. I stared at the screen for a second too long, then answered. Hello? My voice came out small, tense. Brielle. His voice, strained, rasped, panic coated every syllable. We need to talk. Something's going on. Something really bad. I said nothing. I could hear the background. Traffic, the hum of a public space, maybe a gas station. My bank accounts, all of them. They're frozen. I tried to get gas this morning and my card declined. I called the bank and they said there's a federal investigation pending. I dried my hands on a towel, still silent. Brielle, did you do something? He asked, more desperate now. Is this your way of getting back at me? No, I said quietly, but maybe someone else finally is. There was a pause on the other end. Tessa got fired yesterday, walked out by security. They said an anonymous tip came in with documentation, stuff no one should have had. At that moment, Elara walked into the kitchen. She didn't say a word, just poured herself a glass of water and leaned casually against the fridge, listening. I don't know who's doing this, but it's someone dangerous, Damon continued. They're in my emails, my accounts. They're posting things, personal things, financial records, screenshots between me and Tessa. There was a faint ping on his end. Wait, what the hell? Someone just sent an email from my account to my boss. And another one to my dad. Elara raised an eyebrow. Calm. Focused. You need to call them off, Damon said, voice cracking. This isn't funny anymore. I'm living in my car. I can't rent a place. Every credit check comes back flagged. This has to stop. I looked at Elara. She met my eyes, gave a slow, deliberate shake of her head. I didn't hire anyone, Damon, I said evenly. But maybe you should ask yourself. Who would have reason? The line went quiet. And then, very softly, I heard him whisper, Elara. Damon's whisper echoed through the line like a crack in glass. Elara. She didn't hesitate. She walked over, took the phone from my hand with quiet precision, and brought it to her ear like she'd done it 100 times before. Hi, Dad, she said, voice clear. Calm. Not cold. Controlled. There was a pause, then his voice, thin and frantic. Elara, thank God. Sweetheart, something awful is happening. Someone is coming after me. And Tessa. They've hacked everything. You mean someone's exposing what you did? She replied. That's not an attack, Dad. That's a consequence. Elara, listen to me. Whatever you think you know, it's not that simple. Adults make complicated financial decisions. You don't understand how this works. I understand that you emptied my college fund, she said evenly. I understand that you used my social security number to apply for a mortgage in Florida. There was silence. His breath caught. How do you... Who told you that? No one told me, she said. I found it myself, along with the forged loan documents and credit applications in my name. Elara, you're 13, he stammered. There's no way. You made me grow up, remember? He tried again, softer this time. I didn't mean to hurt you. I love you. I love your mom. I was going to fix it, I just needed time. She didn't flinch. You weren't trying to fix anything. You were trying to disappear. Elara, please. You chose her, Dad, and you chose money. And now you're paying the price. He started to say something, but she cut him off. You once told me that actions have consequences. Well, welcome to yours. Then she lowered the phone and tapped end call with her thumb. Just like that. She stood there, staring at the darkened screen, her chest rising and falling slowly. He won't call again, she said. How do you know? I asked. She looked at me, not as a child, but as a force. Because now he knows I'm watching, and he knows I'm not afraid. A few days after Damon's desperate call, I found Elara at the dining table. Not doing homework, not scrolling her phone. Budget spreadsheets, tax folders, a hand-drawn flowchart of our monthly expenses, all color-coded. Did you do all of this? I asked, stunned, holding a mug of lukewarm coffee I'd already reheated twice. She didn't look up. Yeah. We were overspending on utilities. I switched us to a new energy plan this morning, $42 less per month. I also filed to freeze the joint accounts Dad had access to, and you need to close the credit card in your name before he tries something else. Elara, I whispered. She finally looked up, those dark eyes focused, not hard, but deliberate. Mom, I know this isn't what you wanted me doing with my weekend, but someone has to. I sat across from her, slowly, like I might break the spell. You're 13. You should be hanging out with friends, stressing about algebra, not balancing our budget. She shrugged. I still did my algebra, and I'm not doing this because I want to. I'm doing it because we can't afford for you to fall apart. That one landed. You think I'm falling apart? I think you're overwhelmed, and I think you're allowed to be. But we still need a plan. She turned her laptop so I could see. There were tabs open for legal aid, free credit counseling, even divorce attorneys with sliding scale fees. You made a folder, I said quietly. 2, she corrected. 1 for legal recovery, 1 for financial independence. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Elara, this is incredible, but I hate that you had to become this. She paused, pen in hand. I didn't become this because I wanted revenge, Mom. I became this because someone had to protect us. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You shouldn't have to carry all of this. Her grip tightened slightly. Maybe not. But right now, I'm the one who can. The waiting room smelled like lavender and leather-bound journals, calming on purpose, the kind of calm that makes you realize how much tension you've been carrying. Elara sat beside me, perfectly still, legs crossed, her notebook tucked under her arm like she was heading into a seminar, not a therapy session. I kept glancing at her, hoping for some flicker of nerves, even irritation, but she was unreadable, focused. Dr. Holloway will see you now, the receptionist called gently. Elara stood, nodded once to me, and walked in alone. I stayed in the lobby, hands clasped tight in my lap. 20 minutes passed, then 40. I couldn't stop picturing her in that room, facing a stranger with a degree on the wall and a clipboard in hand. I kept wondering if she'd finally cry, or if she'd say too much, or nothing at all. When she came out, her expression hadn't changed. She walked past me toward the lobby couch, then turned back, calm as ever. She wants to speak with you, alone. I nodded and followed the doctor into her office. Soft blue walls, tissue boxes in every corner, a diffuser humming in the background. I'm Dr. Marcy Holloway, she said kindly. Elara gave me permission to share today's session with you. I sat slowly. How was she? Dr. Holloway gave a long breath, the kind you give when choosing your words carefully. Your daughter is remarkable, she said. Exceptionally intelligent, highly adaptive. What she's done in response to the trauma, most adults wouldn't have been capable. I swallowed. Is she okay? She's functioning. But that's not the same as healing. She leaned forward. Elara's coping through control. She's found her power in solving problems, building systems, righting wrongs. It's her armor. But it's also how she's avoiding grief. She hasn't cried once, I whispered. She might not. Gifted children often intellectualize emotions, but that doesn't mean the pain isn't there. I felt tears sting behind my eyes. Is she broken? Dr. Holloway shook her head. No, she's resilient. The question isn't whether she'll recover, it's whether you're ready for the version of her that's emerging. It started with a question over breakfast. Mom, do you know where all your bank accounts are? I blinked at Alara. Her cereal spoon paused midair, eyes locked on me like we were back in the therapist's office, only this time she was the one asking the hard questions. I think so, I said carefully. Why? She set her spoon down. Because when I asked Dad the same thing 2 months ago, he had 3 I didn't know about. One was in someone else's name. I stared at her. I know I'm just a kid, she continued, but this family has gotten away with too many secrets, and I think it's time we start protecting ourselves. That weekend, we sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by folders, statements, my laptop open like a command center. Alara had created a spreadsheet labeled Mom's Fortress. Line by line, we audited every account: savings, 401k, life insurance policies. She highlighted red flags, like the fact that I hadn't updated my beneficiaries since before the divorce. Your will still lists him, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My breath caught. We kept going. She helped me freeze my credit, set up 2-factor authentication on every online account, and schedule an appointment with a female estate planner she'd researched herself. Alara, this is a lot. She gave me a small smile. You said I could code my way into anything. I'm just redirecting it. The shift was quiet but undeniable. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was building. Not just firewalls and folders, but boundaries, systems, safeguards I never knew I needed. That night, she handed me a printed packet she titled Emergency Reboot Plan. On the cover, for Mom, in case they try again. I laughed, then cried, then hugged her tighter than I had in weeks. Sometimes resilience isn't loud. Sometimes it's a 12-year-old girl teaching her mother how not to disappear. The envelope came on a Wednesday, thick, cream-colored, with a gold-embossed seal that felt almost too heavy for the mailbox. Alara was already at the kitchen table when I opened it. Her eyes scanned my face like a heat sensor. I didn't say a word, just handed it to her. She read silently, then placed the letter down with an eerie calm. Full scholarship, I murmured. Stanmore Tech Institute, fast track to their Young Innovators program. This is everything you've worked for. I know, she said softly. A long pause stretched between us, the kind that holds more weight than shouting ever could. Alara, I started. You earned this. You deserve to go. She looked up at me then, and for the first time in weeks I saw the girl behind the armor. I also deserve peace, she said. I blinked. What do you mean? I looked into the board behind the scholarship, she said, pulling out her laptop. Guess who sits on it? Grandpa Damon, and 2 of his closest investors. This, she tapped the letter, isn't a gift. It's bait. Alara. If I go, I'm back in his orbit, tied to their funding, their name. You think he won't use that to control me? My stomach dropped. She reached across the table, took my hand. I'm not walking into another gilded trap. Not again. I'd rather build something from scratch than owe that man anything. I couldn't find words, just pride and guilt and awe. Later that night, I watched her draft the email. Short, direct, unapologetic. Thank you for the opportunity. However, I must respectfully decline. I choose a different path. She didn't even read it twice before clicking send. 12 years old, and somehow she was teaching me how to say no to things that looked like love, but came laced with power. I used to think I was the adult in the house, the one juggling bills, mortgage, groceries, taxes, survival. But lately it felt like Alara was quietly auditing not just my accounts, but my blind spots. Mom, she said one night, standing in the doorway with a manila folder hugged to her chest, can we sit down for a financial strategy talk? I stared at her. A what? She smiled, half nervous, half determined. Please, just give me 10 minutes. We ended up at the dining table, her laptop open, papers neatly stacked like she was prepping for a TED Talk. I braced myself. I went through our expenses from the past 6 months, she began, clicking to a pie chart. We're leaking money on 3 fronts: auto insurance, a duplicate streaming bundle, and a credit card you're still paying interest on even though the balance is low. I blinked. You're 12. And you're working 2 jobs, she replied gently. Let me help. She slid over a typed list titled Reclaiming Financial Power, A Plan for Mom. It had bullet points, comparison tools, suggested consolidation moves, even a list of local co-ops for grocery savings. I felt something in my chest shift, equal parts shame and awe. You stayed up doing this? 3 nights in a row, she said with a tiny shrug. But it felt good, like I was building something safe. I ran my fingers over the paper. Alara, no 12-year-old should have to— No, she cut in softly. But I wanted to, for us. So we're never trapped again. She reached out and squeezed my hand. That night, we canceled 2 subscriptions, transferred a balance, and laughed for the first time in days when the insurance chatbot tried to upsell her. She rolled her eyes and typed faster than I could blink. She was no longer just surviving. She was steering. It was the kind of Tuesday afternoon where everything felt too quiet. The rain tapped gently on the windows of the public library, and Alara sat curled in a beanbag chair by the teen section, thumbing through a book on digital ethics. I was a few aisles over, reading resumes on my tablet, when I heard a man's voice ask, "Excuse me, are you Brielle Archer?" I looked up slowly. He was in his early 30s, khakis and a rain-speckled blazer, with a press badge hanging from a lanyard that read North Star Chronicle. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said gently, "but I've been trying to reach you for days." Alara peeked from behind the shelf, her eyes narrowing. I stood, heart beating faster. "I'm not interested in interviews," I said flatly. He held up both hands. "I understand, but you need to know, someone leaked an internal audit. Your ex-husband's company, offshore accounts, money trails. It lines up with what your daughter's anonymous emails were hinting at. We've verified parts of it." I froze, not because I didn't believe him, but because I did. He continued, voice lower. "We've also confirmed that the Justice Department is quietly looking into it. Your daughter's evidence started a domino effect." I sat down slowly, the library walls suddenly feeling too thin. Alara walked over and sat beside me, her presence quiet but steady. "You're saying it's out now?" I asked. "Yes," he nodded. "And I'd like to tell it right, from your perspective, from hers, if you're willing." I looked at Alara. She didn't blink. "We're not heroes," I said. "No," she replied softly, "but maybe it's time people hear from someone who fought back." The journalist handed me a card, then slipped away, leaving only a raindrop trail and the weight of a decision I didn't know we'd have to make. We sat there in silence, Alara's hand wrapped around mine. For the first time, it didn't feel like we were hiding. It felt like the world was finally turning toward us. It started with a whisper. Then the flood came. 2 days after the reporter left the library, the Chronicle ran the story. Front page. Beneath the surface, Archer Industries, embezzlement, and the teen whistleblower. It spread like wildfire across news stations, blogs, social media. My phone vibrated nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, reporters, even old neighbors suddenly checking in. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't sipped from in hours, staring at the grain of the wood like it held the answers. "Alara," I called gently, "you should come see this." She padded in barefoot, curled up next to me on the bench, and looked at the tablet in my hand. A video was playing. Senator Belford, red-faced and stumbling through a press conference, trying to explain away the offshore accounts. The anchor's voice cut in. "Sources confirm the tip originated from a minor using encrypted email routes. Several legal experts are calling this a landmark in digital whistleblowing." Elara didn't blink. "Do you feel okay?" I asked softly, unsure how to hold the weight of it all. She nodded slowly. "They always thought I was just a kid. I wanted them to feel what it's like to be ignored, silenced. I didn't know whether to feel proud or afraid." An email pinged, my lawyer, then another, an advocacy group, then a voicemail from a morning show producer, and then the last one, a message from Damon's attorney calling for urgent discussion of custody modifications. I laughed under my breath. It wasn't joy. It was the surreal sting of karma coming home in a tailored suit. "Elara," I said, watching her trace the rim of her teacup, "we need to talk about what comes next." She met my gaze. "You mean the part where I don't hide anymore?" Exactly that. The dominoes were falling, not just on Damon or Belford or the corrupt roots of their empire, but on the silence they built it on. And we were standing, finally, on the right side of the crash. It was late afternoon, sunlight stretching in lazy gold lines across the dining table where Elara sat, sketching something into a worn notebook. Her fingers were smudged with pencil lead, her tongue slightly poking out in concentration. For the first time in weeks, her shoulders looked relaxed, unburdened. I leaned on the counter, sipping chamomile tea, watching her without saying a word. She looked up eventually, smiling slightly. "You've been staring," she teased. "Just trying to figure out where you got the brains," I joked back. She flipped the notebook around, revealing a rough but passionate outline. A name at the top, Code Truth. Underneath, bullet points. Anonymous legal aid. Teen-run digital hotline. Online security workshops for youth. "You're building this?" I asked, walking over. She nodded. "I don't want it to end with them. There are other kids out there like me, Mom, stuck in systems, silenced by adults, afraid to speak. If they had just one place to turn, maybe we change something." I knelt beside her, placing my hand over hers. "You're 14, Elara. And I have eyes, ears, and fire," she said, unwavering. "You taught me how to stand up. I'm just passing it on." The lump in my throat wouldn't budge. I thought of the girl who once refused to speak in court-ordered therapy. And now? She was mapping out a network of hope with pencil sketches and open wounds. "We'll need advisors, mentors, maybe lawyers to oversee the cases," I murmured, slipping into planning mode. "We'll need stories," she added, "real ones, and maybe some anonymous funding." That got us both laughing, but underneath the laughter was purpose, raw and rooted. Later that night, I emailed Megan, told her about Code Truth, about Elara's idea. Within hours, she responded, "Count me in. Let's build this for the ones no one listens to." Sometimes revenge burns things down, but sometimes it clears space for something better. And that night, as I watched Elara fall asleep with her notebook resting on her chest, I knew this wasn't just her story anymore. It was about every quiet voice ready to speak. The fireplace crackled softly, casting a warm amber hue across the living room. Outside, the Minnesota snow was falling again. Quiet, like a memory trying to slip back in. Elara sat cross-legged on the couch, her hoodie sleeves pulled over her hands. She hadn't said much all evening, just picked at her dinner and stared out the window. I knew that look. Something was stirring. "I saw him," she said suddenly. Her voice was even, but her fingers gripped the edge of the throw blanket, like she was holding onto the edge of something deeper. "At the courthouse, last week." My chest tightened. I set down my tea. "He didn't see me," she added quickly. "But I saw him." The silence between us stretched for a beat too long. "What did you feel?" I asked gently. Her lips twisted. Anger. Disgust. But also confused. I kept thinking, how could that man be my father? I moved closer but didn't touch her yet. She wasn't done. "He walked like nothing had happened, Mom. Like he didn't destroy people. Didn't destroy me." And I kept thinking, what if he looked at me and didn't even recognize me? "Elara," I said, my voice low. "He doesn't get to define you. Not anymore." She turned to me then, eyes bright with pain. But he made me, biologically. That's the part that messes with me. Half of me comes from someone so cruel. I reached out this time, gently brushing her hair behind her ear. And the other half? I whispered. That's all fire. That's the girl who hacked a system to save herself. Who's building something to save others? She exhaled shakily. I don't want to carry him with me. Then you don't have to, I said. Blood might tie you to him, but it doesn't chain you. You choose who you become. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't brush it away. Do you hate him? She asked. I paused, choosing honesty over comfort. I hate what he did. I don't waste energy on who he is. She nodded slowly, letting that settle. That night, as she fell asleep on the couch beside me, her hand loosely wrapped around mine, I realized she wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for freedom, and she was almost there. The auditorium lights dimmed, leaving only a soft spotlight on Alara's silhouette. She stood behind the wooden podium, a modest figure in a simple navy blazer and jeans. But when she looked up at the crowd, hundreds of students, parents, and community members, you could feel the stillness shift into something electric. She wasn't here to impress. She was here to speak truth. My name is Alara, she began, her voice steady but raw. I'm 12, and I used to think I was just a girl who disappeared when things got loud. There was a hush. Then she reached into her backpack and held up a worn composition notebook, her lifeline, her evidence, her story. I never planned to become anything more than invisible, but I saw things no kid should see. I knew something was wrong, and I wrote it all down. People told me to stay quiet, but silence only protects the wrong people. I sat in the back row, my hands clenched in my lap. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry or cheer, maybe both. I'm not a genius. I'm not a superhero. I'm just someone who finally decided to believe she mattered. She paused, her eyes scanning the front row where Damon now sat quietly, beside our therapist, beside the new social worker she had helped hire with grant money from her foundation. That's right, her foundation. Funded by donations, powered by volunteers, and designed to help kids document and safely report abuse in digital journals with legal backing. My dad once told me I was too much trouble, she said, voice cracking just slightly. But now I know, sometimes trouble is exactly what the world needs. The applause was instant, not polite, not obligatory. It was a wave, surging, fierce, real. As she stepped away from the mic, she glanced back once, just enough to lock eyes with me. She didn't smile. She nodded, like we both knew this wasn't the end. She wasn't born brave. She became brave by surviving. I used to think being a mom meant protecting your child from pain. But Alara taught me sometimes being a parent means helping them fight the pain with purpose. She's still just a girl. But now, she's a girl with a voice and a mission. And I'll walk beside her every step of the way. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. What mission are you ready to step into? Let's build a community where every voice, no matter how small, matters.